Today we are going to look at bylaws related to buildings. In the last session, we looked at bylaws related to land. But before I go ahead, let us first see why do you require bylaws in the first place. If there are no bylaws or regulations, then people will build whichever way and whatever way they want. Because people feel that if they own a piece of land, it is their birthright to do whatever they like with the land. However, we have already said in an earlier session that the ownership of land means the exclusive right to use the land. And even that exclusive right, not unfettered, it is the right to do anything that, but there are certain restrictions which are put on how land can be put to use. Now, this is done through two things. One, the revenue code, which we will not talk about. And the other, very important, is some kind of regulation on how do you develop that land in terms of what do you build on it. And these are the building bylaws. Now, where do these bylaws come from? Again, I have said this earlier, that in India, town planning or urban development is actually in the concurrent list, which means both the central government and the state government can make rules, regulations, or acts. However, the town and country planning, or specifically how do you develop a piece of land, is something that is in the purview of the state. It is not under the central government, but under the state government. So different state governments have their own town planning acts. Okay. However, the central government has made some kind of recommendations about what should these different town planning acts contain, so that there is some kind of uniformity in the way the development can happen. Now, when the town planning act, they have their different planning devices which they use, which are as per these acts. For instance, the regional plan or the development plan or the local area plan. We have discussed all this. Now, these plans, they are not merely a physical depiction of what can be done, but it also has appended to it a set of regulations or a set of bylaws. And these deal with what can be done, what cannot be done in the land use classification order. And it also has bylaws about regulation, how and what can be built. And we are today going to focus on these bylaws, which deal with buildings. Now, first of all, what is the procedure for obtaining approvals? This is the first thing. So usually what happens is that the owner, when he decides to build something, he engages an architect, he causes the drawings to be made, and then there are ownership documents. Then there are drawings about the existing plan, that is the existing site, layout, etc. And what are you build there as a proposal. And all this is submitted to the municipal authorities. They in turn have their internal mechanism to assess whether what is being proposed is as per the building regulations or the building bylaws in existence at that time. If they are satisfied, give you an approval for construction. Now, here I would like to make one very important distinction. The proposal for obtaining the permission is made by the owner, he signs it. The architect is merely there to assist him in getting this permission. This is a very important point that one has to remember. Now, having said this, let us get directly into the bylaw. First of all, there are bylaws related to how you can subdivide a piece of land. or how do you make a layout. But I'm not going to talk about that because this is something that we covered in an earlier session. Now, when it comes to what can be built, there are a whole set of bylaws and they differ from place to place because obviously the climatic conditions, the kind of community that exists in a municipal area, it requires a different kind of approach by the municipal authorities. And therefore, there may be some sort of standardized model set of bylaws, but they differ from place to place. Every time a new development plan or a new local area plan is made, the bylaws are suitably modified and adopted. So today I'm not going to talk about specific bylaws. I'm going to talk about group of bylaws and what do they set out to achieve. The first and the foremost are the bylaws which deal with density. Now, what is density? You see, if you have a piece of land, there is some sustainable limit that the land has in order to allow number of people to reside on it. Let's say I have 1,000 square meter plot. How many people can reside on 1,000 square meter plot? Can it be 10? Can it be 100? Can it be 1,000? So there are many ways in which it can be found out. For instance, you need natural light. You need, that is, light and ventilation. You need ample water supply. You need sewerage. So it's not merely how much you can build, but how much can be sustained by the municipal authorities, as well as the natural surrounds of that particular piece of land. And therefore, the number of people who can live or who can reside on a piece of land is very important. And this is done through density related regulation. So let's see what are the various ways in which density is regulated. First one is tenement density. What is tenement density? How many tenements can you build on a given piece? So if you have 1 hectare of land, build on it. And there's an upper limit. Usually it ranges between 150 to 250. If it is, let's say, a congested area or weaker section housing, it can even go 300. So you see, if you have a cap on the number of tenements that you can build on a given area of land, automatically the number of people who can reside on that land will be limited, because it is assumed that if you have a tenement, you have about 5 people living in a tenement. Of course, it is something which doesn't necessarily hold true, because I know that in places like in the Girgaon area, there was a survey which was made, and they found that number of people resident in a tenement were 5. So anyway, this will differ from place. Now, when you calculate this tenement density on land, tenement density per hectare, 2 ways again. There's a gross tenement density and there is the net tenement density. Gross density means the total piece of land, including open spaces, roads, reservations, etc. And the net tenement density means how many tenements can you on the area of the plots. And usually it is the net tenement density which is used and not the gross. So this is the first method of regulating density. The second method is regulating the percentage of built area per floor and the number of floors or the height of the building. Usually it is not the number of floors, but the height of the building. So for instance, if you have, let's say, the height limitation 10 meters, then you know that you can build 3 floors, not more. And if you say that you can build 1/3 of the plot area on each floor, then obviously the total amount of area that can be built on that piece of land will be 1/3 into 3, so that is equal to the plot area. So this is one simple method of regulating how much you can build on a given piece of land. That is percentage of area that can be built on every floor and the number of floors or the height of the building. Along with this, there is also what is called is margins. As margins, how much space will you leave in at the back, rear, and on the sides. Now, all this margins plus height will also in a way decide the amount of built-up that can be consumed on a given plot of land on all floors. So a combination of percentage of area that you can build, the footprint of the building, per floor built up area, margins, and height. So all this, a combination of all this is the second method of regulating how much you can build. But there's a problem with this method, and the problem is that if it is only the margins, the built over area per floor, and the height that is specified, it actually puts a severe restriction on it, and all your buildings will start looking like boxes. Every floor will have a similar profile, and you don't want that, especially now that you have contemporary or technologies available where you can build in a very different way. Earlier, when only load-bearing structures were built, you had to usually follow the same building profile, one on top of each other for every, because walls had to be built on top of walls with frame structures, and now with many kinds of structures, it is possible to create an architecturally interesting building where the floor plans are not necessary, or the profiles of the floor plans are not necessarily matching. So when that happens, there is another method which is now very popular. In fact, this is the method used by almost every municipal area in India today, and that is to restrict the FAR, floor area ratio, also popularly called as FSI, or floor space index. Now, what is all this? This is simply a ratio between the total built up area on all floors and the area of the land. So let's say that if you have an FSI of 2, and if the land area is 1000 square meters, then 1000 into 2000. So you can build a total area of 2000 square meters consumed on all floors, or a total of area on every floor is restricted to 2 times the area of the plot. If the FSI or FAR is not 2 always, it is usually 1 in smaller cities. And as you go to more and more urbanized areas, the FAR is needs to accommodate more and more built up area on a given piece of land. So the third method, which is more popular, is the FAR or FSI method. Remember that even when you use the FAR or FSI method, you still have the margins and the height restriction. Now, why do you put the height restriction? It is not necessarily dependent on where you build, but usually the municipal areas have their own fire systems. For instance, the municipal area has fire tenders which can only reach up to 24 meters. And if you go for a building which is taller than 24 meters, then in case of a fire, you will not be able to mitigate the fire. So therefore, the restriction is usually dependent on the fire technology that is available in a given city. Nowadays, with modern technology, it is possible to build skyscrapers or very tall buildings. And when you build very tall buildings, fire is looked at in a different way, which we will discuss a little later. But height of building and margins along with FAR is presently the standard method of regulating density. There is also another method which was tried out sometimes back, and that was the not the floor area ratio, but floor volume ratio. Or sorry, the volume area ratio. That means is the total volume you can build as compared to the area of land. But this was not very popular because it was very difficult to calculate volume all the time. So you have the FAR or FSI. Now there are certain exemptions from the FSI. There are certain areas which are not calculated while calculating the built-up area of a building, and these exemptions can be in form of architectural projections, sometimes balconies up to a certain percentage of the floor area, parking areas, basements. Balconies is especially crucial. Cupboards and balconies are especially crucial. If you have been reading newspapers, you know that how the builders have been using this. They have a lot of cupboards and you have a lot of flower beds and balconies out, and later on all these are included in the floor area. So in order to stop all this, the new laws which have been just published in the state of Maharashtra, they have increased the FSI from the present of 1.4, and in I have said is we will now calculate all areas like balconies, flower beds, cupboards which pull out, parking areas, basements, everything we calculated towards FSI. So they are trying to plug that loophole of how people tend to misuse the facility of exemptions under the floor space index or FSI. Then there is a question of floating FSI. Now let's understand what is floating FSI. There are certain conditions. For instance, you have a plot of land and suddenly the road has been widened. The municipal authorities feel that the road which was say 12 meters now they want to make it into an 18-meter road. So obviously if they increase it on both sides, increase the width on both sides, another 3-meter strip of your plot will be taken up for the road and you are at a loss. So there is the possibility of you using additional FSI on your plot. Okay. But usually that is restricted to 40% of the remaining area. So let's say if I have 1000 meters and if I lose 200 meters, the remaining area is 800. And I have lost those 200 meters. How much of it can I use? 8 into 4 is 320 meters. So it is much more than what I have lost. So I can use all my 200 meters. But this calculation is done so that the idea is that you should not have more than 40% additional density on a piece of land. Now, what also happened in between is this floating FSI came into being because there were municipal reservations on different plots of land. And remember, these reservations have to be purchased from the owner by the municipal authorities. Now, many times the municipalities just do not have those. So what do? They say, we will not give you money, but we will give you a certificate which says that you have that much of floor space index with you. Suppose I have a plot which is say 3000 square and is taken away, the 3000 square meter is taken away as, let's say, for some reservation. Then the municipal authorities will issue a certificate to me which will say 3000 square meters of FSI we can use or sell. I can sell part of it to different people who want to use additional FSI on their land. Of course, that additional FSI is restricted to 40% of the existing area. So what do? I don't get money from the municipal corporation, but instead I get this certificate, and this area that is available on the certificate, I can sell to somebody else who wants to build more on his own piece of land. And I can sell it in pieces and parcels. So if I have 3000 square meters, I need not sell it to only one person. I can sell it partial, say 1000 meters to another person, 200 meters to second person, like that. I can go on making small pieces of the floating FSI that I have. And this is called as TDR, or transfer of development. TDR certification is something which allows you to use the floating FSI. And nowadays there is another third method where the government itself wants to make more money. The area government wants to make more money. So what do? They now allow additional FSI which can be purchased from the municipal authorities. So if I have a piece of land and I want to build more, of course the upper limit is 40% of existing land. I can buy additional FSI not only from somebody who has a TDR certificate, but from the government itself. So these are some of the new methods of allowing people to consume more FSI than what is available to them. All in all, it is all density control regulations. Now let's go to the next important and big chunk of bylaws, which fall under human comfort and hygiene. Now, what is human comfort? Human comfort is with ensuring that human beings are comfortable using the building, which means light, ventilation, and ample space to move. These are human comfort issues, and of course, protection against rain, water, etc., etc. And hygiene is related to obviously ensuring that premises are safe for human beings to stay. Hygienic. This hygiene will become very important now that we are facing the pandemic. So what are the bylaws do that? First of all the rooms in the building, they are defined as either habitable or non-habitable. Habitable rooms are those human beings reside. So living rooms, bedrooms, dining rooms, etc. Non-habitable areas are kitchens, balconies, store rooms, toilets. Even there are people who spend a lot of time in the toilet. It is not considered as residing in the toilet. So it's a non-residential area or a non-habitable room. Now for habitable rooms, in order to ensure that they are comfortable, the minimum area of habitable rooms is defined. Also, the minimum width of the room is defined, so that you don't build too small a room which will become uncomfortable. Even for kitchens and toilets, the minimum area and the minimum width is defined. Okay, this is the first bylaw towards human comfort. Secondly, you need light and ventilation. Now you can only get it from a window. So the window areas related to the floor area of the room are also determined. The minimum area of windows that you must have are determined and differ from place to place to the climate, from 1/10 to 1/5. This is the limit. In a place you need 1/6 or roughly 1/6 of the room area as a window area. Now these windows obviously have open out into outside. You can't have a window between the living room and the bedroom and say that I have got a window here, because that would not give you light and ventilation. So the next bylaw, that every habitable room and even kitchens and toilets, they have to abut on an external wall, so that you can puncture windows and bring in light and ventilation. Now, these external, they open to either the margins, that is front, side, and rear open space or rear margin, or they can open out into a courtyard. But again, a courtyard is defined as something where the minimum width of the courtyard has to be equal to the margin area, to the margin, side margin. Okay, so if the side is 3 meters, you can't have a courtyard which is smaller than 3 meters and access light and ventilation from that. All right. The large size courtyards can also have those open to habitable rooms to get light and ventilation. Toilets can open into smaller courtyards. They are not called courtyards, they are called chalks. So, but even that minimum area of the chalk is defined, and that is related to the height of the building. So every external wall in a habitable room will give you natural light, and the area is defined. Size of access or doors. So why do you have to define that? Because if you have a door which is not tall enough, it will not be comfortable to use that door. So minimum width and height of the door are also defined. Next, when it comes to the external parts of the building, for instance, the plinth. The plinth is required because when it rains, water should not come in. Minimum height of the plinth is given. If you have a basement, the different dimensions are given. Basement or parking, what should be the minimum height that is given. In fact, for all habitable rooms, the minimum height is also given, because it has to be comfortable to use. I'm going to talk about the numbers because they differ from place. But the minimum height, clear height, basements in all parking areas, as well as the internal areas of the building are also given. When it comes to accessibility, the widths of the staircases are given. Height of the handrail or safety walls, if any, parapets, that is given. Minimum of trade and minimum height of the riser is given, so that you make a staircase which is too steep. It should be comfortable. Again, comes under the human comfort and hygiene group. So even for staircases, minimum width of staircase, number of steps you can climb at a time up to the landing, width of the trade, height of the riser, height of parapet, etc. This is again part of human comfort. Distances between two staircases. This is very important because if you have a public building, if you're on an upper floor, you may walk a lot on the floor itself. So the maximum distance between two staircases can be 30 meters, not more. So this is again another bylaw related to human comfort. Okay. We have talked about margins and height. Now, one very important aspect of margins is that the side or the front and the rear, they allow natural light and ventilation to come into the building. Okay. Now, imagine a situation where I build from edge to edge. If I build something on an entire piece of land, and somebody else who is adjacent, who has a land adjacent to mine, and if he also builds from edge to edge, where will they get in light and ventilation? There will be no place. So there is something called as ancient light. Ancient light means light, natural light and ventilation that you can draw into your window. The right to get natural light and ventilation into your buildings, and this ancient light is restricted to your own plot, which means if I have to bring in light and ventilation, I must from my own plot and from somebody else's. Otherwise, it will create an easement, right? And we will study easements next semester when we study laws related to it. But right now, remember that you cannot draw light and ventilation from somebody else's property. So what is the rule of the thumb? The rule of the thumb is that margin should be about 50% of the height of the building. But now with new technologies, when you want to build taller and taller buildings, somehow or the other, this half of the height has now become one of the height. Now people can build three times the building can be three times taller than the margin. But it also means that as you build taller and taller buildings, you will have to leave more and more space on all sides, which stands to reason. So we talked about margins and their use for the purpose of bringing light and ventilation and how important it is. Now let's go over to the next type of bylaws, and they deal with human safety and security. And first and foremost in that is the fire regulations. I will not talk in greater detail about fire regulations, but there are simple bylaws which I will mention here, that for all public buildings, you need to have enough space all around the building for the fire tender to move. Even on larger plots where you have residential buildings, the fire tender or the fire engine has to enter into the plot and move on all four sides. So you need bigger marginal spaces. Then you need all kinds of equipment which needs to be installed. Suppose you have lift and you need a fire lift, how to operate that, what sort of a backup do you require, what should be the widths of staircases, what should be the finishes on the staircases. In case of AC, what kind of dampers do you require? There's a detailed set of bylaws in the fire related security or safety of the building. I will not talk about it now because we just don't have the time, but it is all mentioned in the accompanying book. You can read it. The another important aspect of fire regulations, I will just mention it here, is the refuge area. You know, when especially in tall buildings, it is not possible in case of fires to rescue everybody. So you need to create safe areas within the building where people can come and wait till they are rescued. And these are called the refuge areas. So they have to be dealt with carefully. So these are two things in fire safety that I will talk about. Rest you can read. Let us next go to a very, very important set of bylaws which deal with parking. Now you all know that parking is something for which the demand is going up and up because people are owning more and more cars, or more and more people are owning more and more cars. So the number of parking spaces that have to be provided in the residential buildings are mandated or regulated. And this will go on increasing. So maybe what was true 10 years back is not true today. Today you need a higher set of higher number of parking areas. Now, I will only quickly talk about few things related to parking. Parking has to be separate from the margins. You know, many times you feel that I have space on all sides of the buildings, so I will park the vehicles there. That is not allowed. Parking has to be in addition to the margins. That's one. Second, when you say off-street parking, again, what is off-street parking? Parking which is not done on the street for commercial buildings. This also has to be not within the margins, not within the front open space, but it has to be in addition to. This is something which is important. Now, of course, you can have parking in, and you can have multiple basements because parking increases. You need more floors to accommodate parking. You can even have multi-story parking lots which are separate. Now, if you have a large mall, the number of cars that you need to accommodate will be many more. So now there is a tendency to build a separate structure just for. But the number of cars that have to be provided are calculated commercial building based on number of users. Now, how do you calculate number of users? There's a simple formula. For shading areas, For every 3 square meters, you assume that one person. And for office areas, other than shopping, commercial, we assume that you have one person for 6. This is how you calculate the number of persons. Based on the number of persons, you calculate number of parking areas required. Size of one car, you all know, though there are different types of cars, is about 2.2 by 4, 3.84 meters, like that. But parking area required per car is 2.4 by 5. This is the minimum, or 2.5 by 5. Now, these cars that are basements, then you'll have to provide ramps for the cars to go down. And again, the slope of ramps is fixed. What is the minimum slope that it must have? Oh, sorry, what is the maximum slope that it can have? So, short distances, it can even be to 6, otherwise it is 1:10. Are being used for human beings also. The minimum is 1:10, but ideally 1:15. And now, especially with wheelchairs, etc., you need to provide ramps everywhere. So, parking regulations are very important. Again, I will leave you here with parking for you to do a little more reading. Next, there is the whole question of sanitation and water supply. We have already seen that in the residential buildings, what is the minimum number of toilets required? Obviously, for every residence, there has to be at least one toilet. The bylaws are given for the minimum areas, etc., etc. For public buildings, once again, number of toilets are calculated based on the population which is going to use it. Public building, let's say like a school, a college, a commercial building, a theater, all these require toilets. And again, there are 3 kinds of toilets. There are toilets for males, there are toilets for females, and there are toilets for the challenged or differently abled, whatever way you call it. So the minimum requirement is again based on population, and this requirement gives you number of wash basins, number of urinals, and number of water closets. These are all mandated under the bylaws. How do you finish the surfaces of toilets is given. How do you take care of the sewage is given. You will need either a septic tank or the municipal mains. All those details are given as a part of the bylaws. Similarly, for water supply, what is the minimum amount of water that you have to store? Once again, there the norm is about 135 liters of water per person per day. So that in turn tells you how much of water you have to store in the underground suction tank or overhead tank. These capacities are given. And for fire fighting, you need a separate tank. So even that capacity is given. So these are bylaws related to water supply, safety regulations that are necessary, related to even water supply are given. These come under a larger group of sanitation and water supply. Now, there are a few other types of bylaws which we will quickly look at. There is this whole concept of heritage. What is meant by heritage? See, certainly there are certain buildings which are of importance in terms of heritage. There are certain precincts which are heritage precincts. Now, there are bylaws related to what you can build and what not build around these heritage structures. If it is a heritage precinct, then what could be the architectural character that is also given in the bylaw. See, for instance, if you go to Chandigarh, on certain streets, they will tell you, in fact, it's a very interesting thing to look at. They give you the complete guidelines within which your elevations of buildings have to be accommodated. Number of types of windows, everything is given. Or there are I've given you the example of Jaipur. I'll give you another example. There is a street in Delhi where the architectural control says you have to clad all in Dholpur only. So even these kinds of regulations are there. There is obviously the skyline control. I've talked about it in the last session. So when coming back to heritage, what you can build around heritage buildings and what not. And suppose your property itself has a heritage building, what do? Because conservation is now important, and very simply they give you floating FSI nowadays if there is a heritage structure on your building. But there are many other ways, and I heritage conservation bylaws related to this are important. Then there are two other types of bylaws which are also very important. First one, which is related to barrier-free environment. It means your public buildings have to be accessed by everyone, by small children, by people who are physically challenged. And for us, there is a separate set of bylaws which deals with, once again, railings, railing heights, ramps, staircases, signage. Remember, for the blind, there is another kind of signage that is to be there, which is on the floor, so that a man who is walking with a stick can see the the floor finish and how he's going to go. For the people who use wheelchairs, once again, the widths of the staircase, not the staircase, widths of the lifts, widths of corridors, ramps, their slopes, toilets, doors opening outside or inside some sort of a bar handle for the person using a wheelchair. So these sorts of bylaws which are related to ensuring that your buildings are barrier-free or there is no barrier for to use them are also there. Once again, you can read them up. And lastly, there are bylaws related to environment, especially when you have very large. If a large population of people is going to descend on a piece of land, and if they are going to use it, what kind of environmental impact will it have on this area? This has to be studied. And for certain kinds of projects, residential ones, beyond a certain volume, we have to obtain environmental clearance from the relevant department, for which you have to do environmental impact studies and get the necessary clearances. And of course, there are some special bylaws. For instance, there is an airport, then there is a funnel, a funnel shaped sort of an area within the. If you draw the section, then and if you create a funnel, now you can't build anything within the funnel, obviously, because it will interfere with air traffic. So things like this are also now important, which are included in bylaws. And just as the different plans are taken a fresh look at after every 20 years, once the horizon is over, even bylaws amended from time to